Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy with Sweetfish Media. I've got with me today Scott Cullather, co-founder and CEO of INVNT. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Nikki. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's a little gray for Austin in the springtime, but I'm pushing through. So
really excited to be with you this morning and to be a part of the Growth podcast. Sitting here in our corporate headquarters in New York City, it's actually spectacular out. It's a beautiful spring day here in New York.
Jealous. Every time I hear about a spring day in New York, it reminds me of the movie You've Got Mail, and so I get a little jealous. I've just dated myself there too a bit. Anyway. So Scott's going to be talking to us today about how B2B marketers can embrace live brand storytelling, which I'm so excited to hear more about. But before we get into that, Scott, I'd love to hear just a little bit of background on you and what the folks at INVNT have been up to these days.
Yeah, of course. So again, I'm Scott Cullather. I'm the CEO of INVNT, and I've been in the business of live events for literally about 50 years, almost as long as I've been alive. But in truth, my father was the 13th employee of an agency called Jack Morton Worldwide, which is now called Jack, part of the Interpublic Group. So I literally grew up in the business of live events. And in 2008, my partner and I, Christina McCoubry, started INVNT because we believed that there was a better, stronger, and smarter way to design and create live storytelling experiences for our clients and our customers. So despite the economic meltdown, we set out to start a global live brand storytelling agency. Almost 11 years later, we are well on our way to doing that. We now have 8 offices in 5 different countries on 4 continents across 6 different time zones. So we truly have become a global live events business.
That's so exciting. I cannot wait to really jump into this. And so the first thing I think, just to sort of put things in perspective, frame the conversation, how about you give us a little more detail on what exactly live brand storytelling looks like? What is it?
That's a great question. So for us, live brand storytelling is the sort of the culmination of a brand or an organization's goals and objectives and stories that they want to tell to their key target audiences, whether it be a consumer, whether it be a member of the press or members of the press, whether it be key constituents or customers. And so what we do as an agency is we help these large organizations and these brands bring those stories to life in unique and compelling ways. And in essence, it's a live event that is combined with a bunch of different things: visual identity, graphic design, creativity, strategic thinking, and technology, plus the use of social and digital media, which is very important these days.
Scott, you have my attention. This sounds like nothing I've ever seen before. And before we get into some examples, I'd like to know why should B2B brands care? Why should they use live brand storytelling?
That's a great question, and a couple of things. I mean, first and foremost, the ability to connect with the heart, the mind, the body, and the soul of a key constituent or target audience member is unmatched when it comes to live brand storytelling. There's no other medium in the world that doesn't have some sort of a barrier between the brand or the organization and their key target audience. So for instance, digital has a screen in front of you. Print has a page in front of you, so on and so forth. Live, you are interacting directly with your key core target audience members. And so therefore, live, in our opinion, has the ability to change the way people think, feel, behave, or perform in some way greater than any other medium that's out there. So that, combined with the fact that half the world's population in 2 years' time is going to be millennials and gens. So over 7 billion people in the world are going to be of the age that studies show a live experience is first and foremost the most important thing that they want. So I always sort of joke about this and say, the young couple that you speak to, she says that I would rather have a live experience. I'd rather go to Coachella than get an engagement ring. And so what that says to us that in 2 to 3 years' time, half the world's population is going to want a live experience. And so it's those two things in combination that really say to us that this idea of live brand storytelling agency is going to be extremely relevant in the next 10 years.
Speechless. I'm not quite a millennial. I think I was born just a little bit earlier than the rest of those folks. But this appeals to me. I too like a good experience. And so I'm excited to hear some of the examples that you and I talked about offline. But before we get to that, I know that folks listening are curious to maybe try this themselves. What are some tips that you would have for B2B brands to leverage this medium, to leverage live brand storytelling and get it right?
Yeah. So the first thing is the idea needs to be grounded in strategy. So you can't come up with something cool and fun and creative just to be cool and fun and creative. It's got to be grounded in strategy. So you've got to understand then what your key objectives are and what your KPIs are. So we always suggest to clients to try and identify first and foremost, why are we doing this? And if we start with the why, then that leads us to what's the strategy? And then that'll allow us to begin to build out tactics and then set KPIs or key performance indexes. So that's an important one. The second one is to understand who you're communicating with and to figure out the best ways to engage them. There are studies that show that we're bombarded by over 20,000 messages every single day. So Nikki, in the time that you and I have been talking, you've been interrupted probably 14 or 15 times as I've been speaking likewise. Right. So you need to understand what that target audience, who that target audience is, because then that will allow you to figure out how best to communicate with them and how best to put the right mix of media and technology and creativity together with this live event. And then I think as importantly is that you need to be authentic. So if you're talking to a group of millennials or Gen Zs, you need to speak authentically to them. If you're speaking to a group that is in Singapore, you need to speak to them and communicate with them and create an event that is an authentic representation of how they think and feel.
In B2B, sales and account management communications happen via email. You might be familiar with email tracking, sending an email and knowing if the person on the other end opened it or not. The problem is most tools fail when you send an email to multiple recipients. Oftentimes you get a message that says someone opened your email without knowing exactly who. Today's sponsor, Focus.io, helps sales and account management professionals with per recipient email tracking, so you can identify who actually opens your emails or clicks the links that you send. Focus.io brings a ton of other features to Gmail and G Suite too, like automated follow-up to leads who don't reply, integration with Salesforce and other CRMs, bulk email campaigns, and much more. All of this without ever leaving Gmail. Sound like things that could make you more productive? We have an exclusive 25% lifetime discount for B2B Growth listeners. To get your discount and learn why so many inside sales teams love Focus.io, head over to Focus.io/growth. That's V as in Victor, OCUS.io/growth. Just think Focus, but with a V. When you sign up, you'll enjoy a 25% lifetime discount on select plans. All right, let's get back to the show.
I am so excited to hear exactly what this looks like. So go ahead and paint the picture for me and our listeners with a couple of examples of this live brand storytelling in action.
Right. So one event that comes to mind is a program that we did last year for the launch of the newest Atlantis hotel property in Sanya, China. This was a spectacular property that was being designed and built by two organizations, Kerzner, which is the owner of the brand Atlantis, and then Fosun, which was the developer, a Chinese developer of the property itself. Our goal was to create an event that brought the unique personality of Atlantis Sanya to life in a way that had never been done before. So we created a experience that lasted about 2 hours. We had 2,500 journalists and key constituents from around the world come to watch this experience and participate in this experience. We designed a live opening performance that lasted about 15 minutes. It had roughly 75 performers on stage, and we created this unique world, this undersea world that came to life and then merged with an above sea world, which represented Sanya. So we had representation of this mystical character called Atlantis and this mystical universe, Sanya, which is now being developed. And we brought that to life through song and dance and performance and media and audience engagement. The net result was that it became the most successful launch of any of the Atlantis properties that have been opened to date.
Wow, what a good example. Were there mermaids? I have to know.
There were mermaids. There were mermaids.
Have me. It's like you read my diary.
We had cirque-like performances with people spinning around the stage. And then, of course, the culmination was we lit up the new Atlantis Sanya property and did a giant fireworks display all over the top of the hotel. So that's one example. A more recent example is the launch of the Genesis Mint concept car that we just did here in New York City last month. And it happened to be the first event that was designed and produced at the new Hudson Yards property. That's the one with the famous piece of art called The Vessel in Hudson Yards, which is the largest real estate development in the country at the moment. And the idea was that we wanted to create a concept around a small car in the Big Apple. So the Genesis is known for luxury car brands. Mint is like their version of the smart car. So it's a small two-person car that's meant for city urban driving. It's completely electric and it's efficient. And so the concept was that the small car, Big Apple. So we played with scale and we brought the car out against all these luxury products that were oversized in front of the most spectacular real estate development, arguably in the world right now, to launch this vehicle, bringing the story of the Mint and the benefits and the features of it being this smart, economically efficient, and sustainability efficient car to life, and yet still played with all the luxurious components that it has.
I love it. What I'm really like keying in on when we have this conversation, and I've talked to a few folks in the B2B marketing space who are talking a lot about how things that B2C marketing has been doing for a while and getting right when it comes to this experiential stuff are now starting to spill over into what B2B marketers are doing. And if they're smart, they're paying attention and taking that on. This sounds like a really good example of that. Yeah.
For sure. In fact, I think, people laugh at me when I say this, but because of what I described earlier with the millennials and the gens, and this notion of the intersection of live events and all of that, much like HR never was seated at the C-suite table, human resources or chief people officer, much like a chief technology officer was never seated at the C-suite table, and eventually they've moved into that C-suite. I think there's going to be a new CEO in town, and for smart companies, that CEO is going to be the chief experience officer. So one of the things that we're struggling with as an industry right now is that these experiences are often downstream of the strategic thinking of large companies.
Right.
The smart companies are going to move that experience person up to the C-suite so that it becomes a strategic component and it has strategic relevancy. Companies are spending hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars every year investing in live events to change the way people think, feel, behave, or perform, as I'd said earlier. Mm-hmm. So the smart companies are going to have to start baking that into their corporate strategy year in and year out, much like they've done with HR and technology.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. What a time to be alive. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I'm sure, like I said, our listeners are going to get a lot from that and hopefully start to think more about how they can put this stuff to action at their respective organizations. What I'm interested in now is I've enjoyed picking your brain. I want to know what kind of stuff you're putting in there. What learning resource, be it a blog, a book you read, a movie you watched, even whatever it is that is sort of speaking to you, informing your approach these days over there?
Right. So I love reading, and I especially love reading business application books. The one that's really top of mind for me right now is Hit Refresh, and it's by the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella. And it's particularly relevant to me and our agency for two reasons. In 2015, we were acquired by Time Inc. And so we went from becoming an independent agency to becoming a part of one of the largest media conglomerates in the world. That deal undid itself in 2017. So this notion of hitting refresh, as Satya calls it, is extremely relevant to us because we're now in what we're calling INVNT 2.0. Mm-hmm. And we're doing exactly what he's set out to do with Microsoft, which is to kind of reinvent who they are as an organization. And we're certainly doing the same thing on a much different scale. But the other thing that's relevant and what he talks about in the book is how even though they're a technology company or a software company, depending on how you would characterize them, mm-hmm. their single greatest asset is their people. And so his whole notion of hitting refresh is about refocusing on this amazing asset that they have, which is their people. And that's very much where we're focused as well. In fact, we've created a people strategy team, which is in development, but the idea is that it will focus on the things that matter most to our people in our organization. Because in the end of the day, we are in the service business. Our IP is our people. And so we need to develop strategies that take care of those people and provide them with career paths and all of that sort of stuff. So the book Hit Refresh is really top of mind for me right now.
It's a good one. I'm excited to take a look at it myself. You've been so great sharing this stuff with us today. I know that there are folks out there who are going to want to follow along with what you're doing and connect with you. How can folks stay connected with you?
All right. So I think the best ways are invent.com. So www.invnt.com. And then we have at INVNT on Twitter, and I'm at S Cullather, Cullather on Twitter.
Thank you so much, guys. Go check it out. My last little side note I'd like to give is their logo is a razor blade. So do I need to say anything else? It's like one of the coolest people I've spoken to so far. Thank you so much, Scott. I'd love to have you on again later in another time and get some more examples of the cool stuff you guys are doing out there.
Thank you so much.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.